tell me about Neon Future. How did that kind of idea come to be?
So I'm utterly convinced that the way for me as a first-time publisher to break in is to be associated with a celebrity. Now, we have to tell a good story, and if the story isn't compelling, we've all seen 1,000 celebrity-driven books suck, and they crash and burn, and it's just an atrocity, right? So I knew coming into it, this cannot be a vanity project. This has really got to be something that's awesome, but it not... Having a celebrity attached helped me get the creative team. It also helped me get a lot of PR that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten. I mean, we got covered by a lot of places. We just had an article come out in Playboy. The New York Times came by and did an interview. I mean, it's just like a lot of really cool stuff for a first-time book, all because of Steve Aoki.
Wow.
And the cool thing about Steve was Steve did not want to be the primary character. He wanted to be a secondary character so that we could just tell great stories that did not need to be, you know, anything that protected his reputation or, you know, his brand image or anything like that. And then also he didn't want it to be Steve. He didn't want to be a DJ in the book or anything like that, right? It's a character that happens to look a lot like Steve Aoki. But in reality, what Steve wanted to do was just tell an extraordinary story around an optimistic future. And so the genesis of the idea was, okay, I know I need a celebrity to be able to get attention for my first book. I've been writing down ideas for the last 25 years, so I have a slew of them. And knowing that Steve had an album coming out called Neon Future, it's the third in the series, knowing his thoughts about the future, he's very much a techno-optimist. This is the guy that actually plans to be cryogenically frozen when he dies, my man. So I was like, all right, this is my kind of guy. Like, I want to live forever. That's my not-so-secret desire, which is partly why I was so drawn to this. And sci-fi, just as a genre, is like my shtick. So here you've got this guy that... So I have an interview show as well called Impact Theory. He came on the show. We really connected. I knew about the cryogenically frozen thing, and I just want to get to know this guy. And so we got to know each other for about a year and realized how he really wants to be a shepherd of the future. And I think that's super cool. And if you know people like Yuval Noah Harari, who talks about how science fiction authors have a moral obligation to paint a vision of the future that's worth building, Steve and I just really saw eye to eye on that. So I pitched him something that leveraged the Neon Future brand about an America 30 years from now in a world where advanced technology has been made illegal. Because I think for real, this is actually going to happen, Omar. We're going to go through a trough of despair. And that trough of despair is going to be brought about by AI and robotics. And that's just truth. Now, I think that it's an unnecessary trough of despair that has to do with fear and people reacting to something versus a real need to panic. But it is going to eliminate millions of jobs. And when it happens, it's going to happen fast.
I agree.
So what we wanted to do was start in that dystopian future, but then make a book about how you get out of that. And so we didn't just want to sit in a dystopia. This isn't man versus machine. This is really about, have you read The Long Walk to Freedom?
I haven't.
By Nelson Mandela. My friend, read this book, dude. It will change you as a human being if you let it. Just an absolutely extraordinary book. And what it showed me was, so Nelson Mandela goes to prison for 27 years. Like, this story is the most absurd story of somebody who just believed they knew what was right and they were willing to pay any price to make it happen. Goes to prison, but somewhere around, I forget, but let's call it year 1819, something like that. He's been in prison that long. And now these more militant, radical young blacks are coming into the prison and they're chastising Nelson Mandela and they're saying, you're not militant enough. And he's just saying, he said he actually really thought about it. And he thought, is it possible that they're right? And the conclusion he came to was that there was this third way. And that when there's oppression going on, there's three options. You can remain oppressed, you can become the oppressor, or you can find this third way, this harmony. And so obviously that's what Nelson Mandela gave the rest of his life to doing, was finding that third way, to come out, to find a way for, to end apartheid, to work together. It's really an extraordinary story, man. That book really, really impacted me. And so we wanted the character that looks like Steve Aoki, is named Kita Sovi, is on a similar quest for that third way. So, and instead of coming out and trying to, because we have the augmented, which are people that have technology actually embedded in their bodies, and then the authentics who do not. And mad props to you for pointing out the very ridiculous fact that those both start with AU. But so we have these two worlds, and so our main character is just trying to find a way for people to bring harmony, and we'll see. And the only thing that we promise readers is he'll make a sincere effort. And whether or not he can actually get out of that is going to be the drama of the story.
Of course, I think that's something that's so true, especially in today's world, seeing that kind of divide. And like, people are always threatened about losing their jobs. The industry's changing now with technology. Are we even going to have work anymore? And how are we going to survive? Because people coincide work with survival. And I truly believe that we will go through that despair and that depression. But I think we'll come out of it, and we don't know if in the future, 100 years from now, if jobs are even going to exist. I think it's going to be based on in a world where there'll be enough, systems will be set up, and food will be there. There'll be universal housing, but this is down the line. We'll both be gone. But I think it'd be interesting.
Speak for yourself, Omar. I think I made it very clear I'm trying to live forever here.
Hey, if you find a way, I'll be there with you.
Nice. Would you?
Yeah.
Because this is a thing. Like, some people actually don't want to live forever.
No.
And I do not understand them.
No, I would definitely want to. There's a few caveats in there. To want to bring the people closest with me.
Fair. What if you couldn't?
See, then it's a slippery slope. You've read the what is it, the Dorian Gray story? What is it?
I know of it, the Portrait of Dorian Gray. I haven't read it actually.
It's interesting because it kind of talks about, like, even if you were to live forever, you'd see everyone you love and you'd experience so much pain. Like, would you talk about creating this culture now? Would you be devoid of it because everyone you would know would eventually pass away and you'd lose that ability to connect emotionally? Like, it's
interesting. I don't think that's what happens. And so, do you have pets?
I do.
All right, we outlive our pets.
It's true.
And we accept that. And now some people, of course, I can hear them cringing like through this, saying that you don't feel the depth of emotion for a pet. And I get that, and that is true. But you feel a massive depth.
Absolutely.
So even if it isn't all that way, I thought I would be impervious to the passing of my parents until my dog died. And I literally was flippant about the fact that my dog was going to die. I had a heart condition. Like, it just was a foregone conclusion. And when he died, I was a mess.
Wow.
And I was like, what is happening? I was so shocked with how hard it hit me. So I realized, yep, for sure, like, there is a real, like, wailing on the coffin kind of despair to lose people like that. But humans are so resilient, and the way things are, this too shall pass. Like, if ever there was a true statement, this too shall pass. So if going into it, no matter how much you love somebody, that feeling will eventually fade, the despair, the loneliness, and you will reconnect with somebody. So I am not afraid of sort of cyclical bonding, knowing that, with a human, let's say that I have 70 years, 100 years, whatever. So even in that scenario, I still want to live forever. 1,000%. That is so interesting to me to see, like, what happens and where we go.
Yeah.
But I'm also imagining a world where I'm living forever through technological advancement, which means that it's available not only to me, but to other people.
That's what I would imagine too, is that, you feel this sense of guilt if you're not able to bring someone else with you, or, like, how come I was allowed to do this? And, I think aging is a scientific process. If we find a way to reverse that, I think it's really interesting.
Dude. Like, we could derail the whole podcast.
I know,
I'm
just talk about
super
this.
fascinated. But yeah, so that was where this idea really kicked off, was with that, like, looking at some interesting way to bring a character back from the dead, and finding the most interesting character to bring back from the dead. So in Neon Future, it's the most famous anti-tech crusader, who's a guy that basically has a show like Cops, but they're hunting the people that have augmented themselves with technology. And so his dad's like the minister of propaganda, and so he's just like, in this new America, he's ultra famous. Good-looking guy, young, and dies. And then he's brought back to life with this illegal technology. And so now he has to come to grips with, who am I? Am I human? Am I augmented? It's like literally the thing that I hated, I am now. And so how do I make sense of that? And his resurrection kicks off a civil war that has basically his coming back to life breaks that balance, the very uneasy balance between the augmented and the authentic, which is controlled by the government. And so now he literally has to decide what side he's going to fight on.